Question 1. Investigation of a night swift driver's electronic logging device, data, reveals a discrepancy where the driver requests a change to a duty status entry from driving to on duty not driving for a period of 30 minutes that occurred earlier in the day. The driver states this was a clerical error and that they were actually performing pre-trip inspections during that time, not driving. What is the most compliant and professionally responsible course of action for Night-Swift's compliance department to take? Option A. Forward the driver's request and the original ELD data to the FMCSA for their direct review and determination on whether the change is permissible. Option B. Allow the driver to manually override the ELD entry to reflect their stated duty status without further investigation, as the driver is responsible for their logs. Option C. Approve the driver's requested change to the ELD record after confirming the driver's explanation aligns with the time and location data available. Option D. Immediately reject the driver's request and instruct them to adhere strictly to the original ELD entry to avoid any appearance of record manipulation. Correct answer is C. Approve the driver's requested change to the ELD record after confirming the driver's explanation aligns with the time and location data available. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a thorough understanding of Night-Swift's internal policies and relevant federal regulations governing commercial motor vehicle operations, specifically concerning driver hours of service. The driver's request, while seemingly minor, could have significant compliance implications if not handled correctly. Careful judgment is required to balance operational efficiency with the absolute mandate of regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves meticulously reviewing the driver's logs against the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA hours of service, HOS, regulations. This means verifying the accuracy of the recorded duty status changes, ensuring that all required breaks are taken, and confirming that the driver has not exceeded the maximum driving or on-duty time limits. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the FMCSA HOS rules, which are designed to prevent driver fatigue and ensure public safety. By prioritizing accurate record-keeping and compliance verification, Night-Swift upholds its legal obligations and demonstrates a commitment to safety. An incorrect approach would be to immediately approve the driver's request without independent verification. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the critical compliance checks mandated by the FMCSA. It creates a risk of falsifying records, which can lead to severe penalties for the driver and Night-Swift, including fines, out-of-service orders, and damage to the company's safety rating. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the driver's request outright without any investigation. While seemingly prioritizing compliance, this could be problematic if the driver's request is based on a genuine, albeit minor, clerical error that can be corrected without violating HOS rules. This approach lacks the due diligence required to ensure accurate record-keeping and could lead to unnecessary disputes or a perception of inflexibility. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the core regulatory requirements. In this case, it's the FMCSA HOS rules. Next, they should gather all relevant information, including the driver's log entries and the specific details of the request. Then, they must compare the information against the regulations, identifying any discrepancies or potential violations. If a discrepancy is found, the next step is to determine if it can be corrected in a manner consistent with the regulations and company policy. This involves seeking clarification from the driver and, if necessary, consulting with compliance specialists. The ultimate decision must prioritize regulatory adherence and safety above all else. Question 2. The efficiency study reveals potential cost savings in Night-Swift's logistics operation that could significantly impact reported profitability. However, the methodology used in the study raises questions about the accuracy of the projected savings and their timing. Which of the following actions best demonstrates regulatory compliance and professional judgment for Night-Swift? Option A. Disclose the potential cost savings to investors in a press release, highlighting the positive outlook, while deferring any operational changes or detailed financial impact assessments until after the disclosure. Option B. Conduct a detailed review of the efficiency study's methodology and assumptions. Consult with Night-Swift's accounting and legal departments to assess the financial reporting implications and determine if any disclosures or adjustments are necessary before acting on the findings. Option C. Ignore the efficiency study's findings due to the uncertainty in its methodology. continuing with current operational practices without further investigation. Option D. Immediately adjust Knight-Swift's financial projections to reflect the full projected cost savings and proceed with operational changes based on the study's recommendations. The correct answer is D. Immediately adjust Knight-Swift's financial projections to reflect the full projected cost savings and proceed with operational changes based on the study's recommendations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Knight-Swift, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulations regarding financial reporting and disclosure. The efficiency study's findings, if not handled appropriately, could lead to misstatements in financial reports, potentially misleading investors and violating securities laws. Careful judgment is required to balance the desire for operational improvement with the imperative of accurate and timely financial disclosure. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation of the efficiency study's findings, including an assessment of their potential impact on Knight-Swift's financial statements. This requires engaging with relevant internal departments, e.g., accounting, operations, and potentially external auditors to determine if any adjustments or disclosures are necessary. This approach aligns with the principles of accurate financial reporting mandated by the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act (SOX), which emphasize transparency and the prevention of fraud. It ensures that Knight-Swift's financial disclosures are reliable and comply with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the findings of the efficiency study, especially if they suggest potential financial implications. This could lead to material misstatements in Knight-Swift's financial reports, violating SEC Rule 10b-5, which prohibits fraudulent or misleading statements in connection with the purchase or sale of securities. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately implement changes based solely on the study without proper financial impact assessment. This could lead to unintended consequences, including inaccurate accounting treatment or a failure to properly disclose the nature and impact of these changes, again risking violations of disclosure requirements. A further incorrect approach would be to selectively disclose only the positive aspects of the study, while omitting any findings that might negatively impact reported financial performance. This constitutes selective disclosure and is a violation of Regulation FD, Fair Disclosure, which requires public companies to disclose material non-public information broadly and fairly. Professionals at Knight-Swift should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes compliance and integrity. This involves 1. Understanding the nature and potential impact of the efficiency study's findings. 2. Consulting with legal and accounting experts to assess regulatory implications. 3. Documenting all findings, analyses, and decisions. 4. Ensuring that any necessary adjustments or disclosures are made in accordance with SEC regulations and GAAP. 5. Maintaining open communication with relevant stakeholders, including the Audit Committee and external auditors. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that a financial reporting team at Knight-Swift is preparing the company's quarterly earnings release. The team is considering whether to highlight certain positive operational metrics that have recently improved, while downplaying or omitting details about a significant but non-recurring legal settlement that negatively impacted net income. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical reporting standards for a publicly traded company in the United States? Option A. Rely solely on the internal accounting department's initial assessment of materiality for the legal settlement, without further review by legal counsel or compliance officers, to determine what information to include. Option B. Fully disclose all material information, including the details of the legal settlement and its impact on net income, alongside the positive operational metrics, ensuring the overall financial picture presented is accurate and complete. Option C. Focus the earnings release primarily on the recently improved operational metrics, providing only a brief, generalized mention of any negative financial impacts without specific details. Option D. Exclude any mention of the legal settlement from the earnings release, as it is considered a non-recurring event, and the focus should be on ongoing operational performance. Correct answer is B. Fully disclose all material information, including the details of the legal settlement and its impact on net income, alongside the positive operational metrics, ensuring the overall financial picture presented is accurate and complete. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Knight-Swift, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight regarding its financial reporting and disclosures. Ensuring compliance with these regulations is paramount to maintaining investor confidence, avoiding legal penalties, and upholding the company's reputation. The core of the challenge lies in accurately and ethically representing financial performance, particularly when dealing with potentially complex or sensitive transactions. Careful judgment is required to interpret and apply relevant regulations, ensuring that all disclosures are complete, accurate, and not misleading. The correct approach involves a thorough review of all relevant financial data and supporting documentation, cross-referencing it against the specific requirements of the applicable U.S. securities laws and accounting standards, e.g., SEC regulations, GAAP. This approach prioritizes transparency and accuracy, ensuring that any financial reporting adheres to the highest ethical and legal standards. Specifically, it necessitates a deep understanding of the reporting obligations for publicly traded companies, including the prohibition of misleading statements or omissions of material fact. This aligns with the fundamental principles of regulatory compliance and corporate governance, aiming to protect stakeholders by providing a true and fair view of the company's financial position. An incorrect approach that involves selectively presenting information to create a more favorable impression, while omitting details that might portray a less positive picture, constitutes a serious regulatory and ethical failure. This can be interpreted as a violation of anti-fraud provisions within securities laws, such as Section 10b of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and SEC Rule 10b-5, which prohibit manipulative or deceptive devices in connection with the purchase or sale of securities. Such an approach undermines the integrity of financial reporting and can lead to severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on the interpretation of a single department without independent verification or consultation with compliance experts, also represents a significant failure. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the comprehensive nature of regulatory compliance. It increases the risk of misinterpretation of complex regulations or overlooking critical disclosure requirements, potentially leading to unintentional violations. Ethical considerations demand a robust internal control environment that includes cross-functional review and expert consultation to ensure accuracy and compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to compliance. This begins with identifying all applicable regulations and standards. Next, it requires a comprehensive gathering and review of all relevant data. Crucially, it involves seeking expert advice from legal counsel and compliance officers when dealing with complex or ambiguous situations. Finally, it mandates a commitment to transparency and accuracy in all disclosures, prioritizing the interests of stakeholders and the integrity of the financial markets. Question 4. When evaluating Knight-Swift's operational procedures for ensuring driver compliance with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration (FMCSA) hours of service hose regulations, which of the following approaches best demonstrates a commitment to regulatory adherence and driver safety? Option A. Implementing a comprehensive system that includes electronic logging devices, ELD, for real-time tracking, regular driver training on HOS, and a dispatch policy that prioritizes legal driving limits over tight delivery schedules. Option B. Relying on drivers to accurately self-report their driving and on-duty hours through paper logs or basic digital entry without independent verification. Option C. Establishing performance metrics that penalize drivers for delays caused by adhering to mandated rest breaks and HOS limitations. Option D. Encouraging drivers to complete their routes as quickly as possible, with the understanding that minor HOS overages may be overlooked if the delivery is critical. Correct answer is A. Implementing a comprehensive system that includes electronic logging devices, ELD, for real-time tracking, regular driver training on HOS, and a dispatch policy that prioritizes legal driving limits over tight delivery schedules. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in the transportation industry, specifically for a company like Knight-Swift, which operates under stringent federal regulations. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency and driver well-being with the absolute requirement to comply with hours of service, hose, regulations. Drivers are often under pressure to meet delivery schedules, which can create a conflict with the mandated rest periods. A failure to adhere to HOS rules can lead to severe penalties for the company, including fines, operational disruptions, and damage to its reputation, as well as potential safety risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively implementing and enforcing robust internal policies that align with and exceed the minimum requirements of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration (FMCSA) regulations. This includes utilizing technology for real-time tracking of driver hours, providing comprehensive training on HOS rules and their importance, and fostering a company culture that prioritizes safety and compliance over aggressive scheduling. Knight-Swift must ensure its dispatch and management teams understand that driver fatigue is a significant safety hazard and that strict adherence to HOS is non-negotiable. This approach is justified by the FMCSA explicit regulations, which place the ultimate responsibility for compliance on the motor carrier. Incorrect approach is analysis. Relying solely on driver self-reporting without independent verification is an incorrect approach. This method is prone to errors, intentional or unintentional, and fails to provide Knight-Swift with the necessary oversight to ensure compliance. It creates a significant regulatory risk, as the FMCSA holds the carrier responsible for HOS violations, regardless of whether the driver reported their hours accurately. Pressuring drivers to complete deliveries, even if it means exceeding their legal driving limits, is a direct violation of FMCSA regulations and is ethically reprehensible. This approach prioritizes short-term operational gains over safety and legal compliance, exposing Knight-Swift to severe penalties, including potential revocation of operating authority and increasing the likelihood of accidents. Implementing a system where drivers are penalized for being late due to adhering to HOS rules creates a disincentive for compliance. This fosters a culture where drivers may feel compelled to violate HOS regulations to avoid negative consequences, directly undermining the safety goals of the regulations and exposing the company to significant legal and financial liabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Knight-Swift must adopt a proactive and compliance-first mindset. This involves understanding that regulatory adherence is not merely a procedural requirement, but a fundamental aspect of safe and sustainable operations. When faced with potential conflicts between operational demands and regulatory mandates, the decision-making process should always prioritize compliance. This means leveraging available technology, providing continuous training, and establishing clear communication channels to address potential issues before they escalate into violations. The ultimate goal is to build a robust compliance program that integrates seamlessly into daily operations, ensuring the safety of drivers, the public, and the company's long-term viability. Question 5. Governance review demonstrates that Knight-Swift's driver onboarding process has a potential gap in verifying the validity and currency of medical examiner's certificates and in confirming the completeness of driving record inquiries prior to a driver operating a commercial motor vehicle. Which of the following represents the most compliant and professionally responsible approach for Knight-Swift to address this identified gap? Option A. Develop an internal checklist for drivers to self-report their medical status and driving violations, and only conduct external verification if a driver reports a significant incident. Option B. Rely on the driver's previous employer to confirm the validity of their medical certification and driving history, without independent verification by Knight-Swift. Option C. Implement a standardized procedure to collect and electronically verify each driver's medical examiner's certificate against FMCSA records, and conduct a comprehensive driving record inquiry through the FMCSA Pre-Employment Screening Program, PSP, for all prospective drivers. Option D. Accept a driver's self-attestation of a valid medical certificate and a clean driving record, provided they have held a commercial driver's license for at least 5 years. The correct answer is C. Implement a standardized procedure to collect and electronically verify each driver's medical examiner's certificate against FMCSA records and conduct a comprehensive driving record inquiry through the FMCSA Pre-Employment Screening Program, PSP, for all prospective drivers. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to regulatory mandates concerning driver qualification and safety. Knight-Swift, as a large transportation company, operates under significant regulatory scrutiny, particularly from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA. The challenge lies in ensuring that all drivers meet the stringent requirements for medical certification, driving history, and training, without compromising the company's ability to maintain its fleet and meet delivery schedules. A hasty or incomplete approach to verifying these qualifications can lead to severe penalties, including fines, operational disruptions, and reputational damage, while an overly cautious approach might hinder recruitment and retention. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process for verifying all aspects of a driver's qualifications, including their medical examiner's certificate, driving record, e.g., through the FMCSA Pre-Employment Screening Program or PSP, and any required endorsements or training. This approach ensures compliance with 49 CFR Part 383, commercial driver's licenses, and 49 CFR Part 391, qualifications of drivers and longer-haul truck drivers. By meticulously cross-referencing documentation and utilizing available regulatory tools, Knight-Swift can confidently onboard drivers who meet all legal and safety standards. This proactive and thorough verification process is not only a regulatory requirement, but also a cornerstone of safe and responsible fleet operation, mitigating risks and fostering a culture of compliance. An incorrect approach that involves accepting a driver's self-certification of their medical status without obtaining a valid medical examiner's certificate directly violates 49 CFR Section 391.41, which mandates that a driver must be physically qualified to operate a commercial motor vehicle. This failure to obtain and verify the required medical documentation is a direct regulatory breach. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on a driver's verbal assurance of a clean driving record without conducting a formal inquiry through the FMCSA PSP or equivalent means, contravenes the spirit and letter of 49 CFR Section 391.23, which requires employers to make an investigation of employment history and driving record. This omission leaves Knight-Swift vulnerable to employing drivers with disqualifying violations that could have been identified through due diligence. A third incorrect approach, such as overlooking the need for specific endorsements for certain types of cargo, e.g., hazardous materials or vehicle types, would violate regulations pertaining to those specific endorsements, such as those found in 49 CFR Part 383. Professionals in this field should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and safety above all else. This involves establishing clear, documented internal policies and procedures that align with FMCSA regulations. When faced with a situation like this, the process should be: 1. Identify all applicable regulations and requirements for the specific role and operation. 2. Develop and implement robust verification procedures that systematically collect and validate all necessary documentation. 3. Utilize available regulatory tools and resources to confirm the accuracy of driver information. 4. Train personnel responsible for hiring and compliance on these procedures and the importance of strict adherence. 5. Conduct regular internal audits to ensure ongoing compliance and identify any potential gaps. This systematic and proactive approach ensures that Knight-Swift not only meets its legal obligations, but also upholds its commitment to safety and operational integrity. Question 6. Analysis of a Knight-Swift logistics coordinator who has received a confidential report detailing upcoming route optimizations that could impact driver schedules. The coordinator needs to share a summary of these optimizations with a specific team lead in operations to ensure smooth transitions. What is the most appropriate and compliant method for the coordinator to share this summary? Option A. Discuss the details of the optimizations in a general company-wide chat channel to inform relevant personnel. Option B. Forward the summary via an unencrypted personal email account to the team lead. Option C. Share the summary through Knight-Swift's secure internal messaging system after confirming the team lead's authorization to receive such information. Option D. Forward the summary to a colleague in a different department who might find the information useful, without explicit verification of their need to know. The correct answer is B. Forward the summary via an unencrypted personal email account to the team lead. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Knight-Swift employee regarding the proper handling of sensitive company information. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for internal communication and collaboration with the imperative to protect confidential data from unauthorized disclosure. Misjudging the appropriate channels or recipients for information can lead to regulatory violations, reputational damage, and potential legal repercussions for Knight-Swift. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to Knight-Swift's established data handling policies and relevant U.S. federal regulations, such as those governing the privacy and security of commercial transportation data. This means understanding what constitutes confidential information, identifying authorized personnel for access, and utilizing secure, approved communication methods. Specifically, this approach prioritizes verifying the recipient's need to know and their authorization to receive the information, ensuring compliance with internal security protocols and external legal mandates designed to prevent data breaches and misuse. Incorrect approach is analysis. Sharing the information via an unencrypted personal email account represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This method bypasses Knight-Swift's security infrastructure, exposing the data to interception and unauthorized access, which could violate data privacy laws and internal security policies. Demonstrates a lack of diligence in protecting sensitive company assets. Forwarding the information to a colleague in a different department without verifying their specific need to know or authorization is also an unacceptable approach. This action expands the circle of access beyond what is strictly necessary, increasing the risk of accidental disclosure or misuse. It fails to uphold the principle of least privilege, a fundamental tenet of data security. Discussing the details of the information in a public forum, such as a company-wide chat channel not designated for such sensitive discussions, is a severe breach of confidentiality. This exposes the information to a wide, unauthorized audience, creating a high risk of data leakage and potential violations of privacy regulations. It shows a disregard for the sensitive nature of the data and Knight-Swift's security obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Knight-Swift should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature and sensitivity of the information. They must then consult Knight-Swift's internal policies and procedures for handling such data. If there is any doubt about the appropriate method of communication or the authorization of recipients, the employee should seek guidance from their supervisor or the designated compliance department. This proactive approach ensures that all actions align with regulatory requirements and ethical standards, safeguarding both the company and its stakeholders. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that Knight-Swift is experiencing a shortage of qualified drivers. To address this, the company is considering a new advertising campaign aimed at attracting new recruits. Which of the following approaches to developing the campaign's messaging best adheres to regulatory compliance and ethical recruitment standards? Option A. Develop campaign materials that accurately represent compensation structures, benefits, and job requirements, ensuring all claims are verifiable and comply with FMCSA advertising guidelines and relevant state consumer protection laws. Option B. Emphasize the company's long history and strong safety record, while keeping the details of driver compensation and benefits intentionally vague to allow for negotiation during the hiring process. Option C. Focus on highlighting the most attractive aspects of driving for Knight-Swift, such as potential earnings and flexibility, using broad statements that avoid specific details that might be subject to change or interpretation. Option D. Utilize testimonials from current drivers that focus on positive experiences, without explicitly stating the specific terms of their employment contracts or the exact nature of their routes. The correct answer is C. Focus on highlighting the most attractive aspects of driving for Knight-Swift, such as potential earnings and flexibility, using broad statements that avoid specific details that might be subject to change or interpretation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to expand its market presence and the stringent regulatory requirements governing advertising and marketing practices within the transportation industry. Knight-Swift, as a publicly traded entity, must ensure all public communications, including those aimed at attracting new drivers, adhere strictly to Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration (FMCSA) regulations and relevant state advertising laws. Misrepresenting services or benefits, even unintentionally, can lead to regulatory scrutiny, fines, and damage to the company's reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance promotional goals with legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach involves developing marketing materials that are factually accurate, transparent, and compliant with all applicable regulations. This means clearly stating the terms and conditions of employment offers, accurately representing compensation structures, and avoiding any language that could be construed as misleading or deceptive. Specifically, this approach aligns with FMCSA's emphasis on carrier responsibility for accurate information provided to prospective drivers and general consumer protection laws that prohibit unfair or deceptive advertising. Ethical considerations also demand honesty and fairness in recruitment practices. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on aggressive recruitment tactics without verifying the accuracy of claims would be professionally unacceptable. This could involve exaggerating earning potential or downplaying the demands of the job, which violates principles of truthful advertising and could lead to driver dissatisfaction and turnover. Such misrepresentations could also fall afoul of state consumer protection laws and potentially FMCSA guidance on carrier advertising. Another incorrect approach that relies on vague or ambiguous language to describe benefits or compensation is also problematic. This lack of clarity can be interpreted as an attempt to obscure unfavorable terms or to mislead potential applicants. Regulatory bodies often scrutinize such ambiguity, as it can be a precursor to deceptive practices. Ethically, it fails to provide prospective employees with the necessary information to make an informed decision. A third incorrect approach that fails to update marketing materials to reflect recent changes in company policy or industry regulations is equally flawed. This oversight can result in the dissemination of outdated or inaccurate information, leading to potential legal and ethical breaches. Professionals must maintain an active awareness of regulatory updates and internal policy changes to ensure all external communications remain current and compliant. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-step review. First, thoroughly understand the target audience and the intended message. Second, meticulously review all proposed marketing content against current FMCSA regulations, state advertising laws, and any other relevant federal or state statutes. Third, consult with legal counsel or compliance officers to validate the accuracy and compliance of the materials. Finally, establish a robust internal review process for all external communications to ensure ongoing adherence to regulatory standards and ethical principles. Question 8. Benchmark analysis indicates that Knight-Swift is experiencing an increase in driver-related safety incidents. To address this, what is the most effective regulatory compliance approach for the company to implement regarding driver hours of service, (HOS), and electronic logging device, (ELD) usage? Option A. Implement a comprehensive internal audit program for driver logs and ELD data, coupled with ongoing driver training on HOS regulations and ELD functionality, to proactively identify and rectify potential violations. Option B. Establish a policy that allows for minor HOS violations to be overlooked if they are necessary to meet critical delivery deadlines. Option C. Empower drivers to self-correct any HOS violations they identify in their logs without company review or verification. Option D. Wait for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, to identify HOS violations during routine audits or roadside inspections before taking corrective action. The correct answer is A. Implement a comprehensive internal audit program for driver logs and ELD data, coupled with ongoing driver training on HOS regulations and ELD functionality, to proactively identify and rectify potential violations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in the transportation industry, specifically for a company like Knight-Swift, where adherence to federal regulations is paramount for operational safety and legal compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the absolute requirement to comply with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, regulations regarding driver hours of service, (HOS). Misinterpreting or circumventing these rules can lead to severe consequences, including fines, out-of-service orders, and most critically, increased risk of accidents. The pressure to meet delivery schedules can create a temptation to overlook or downplay HOS violations, making robust compliance a constant focus. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and addressing potential HOS violations by reviewing driver logs and electronic logging devices, (ELD), for discrepancies or noncompliance. This proactive stance ensures that Knight-Swift maintains a culture of safety and regulatory adherence. Specifically, this approach aligns with FMCSA's emphasis on accurate record-keeping and driver responsibility for complying with HOS limits. By conducting regular internal audits and providing ongoing training on ELD usage and HOS rules, the company demonstrates a commitment to preventing violations before they occur or are discovered during an audit. This proactive measure is not just about avoiding penalties. It's about fostering a safe operating environment, which is a core ethical and regulatory imperative for all motor carriers. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to only address HOS violations when they are flagged by the FMCSA during an audit or inspection. This reactive strategy is insufficient because it implies that compliance is only necessary when under scrutiny. It fails to demonstrate a commitment to ongoing safety and regulatory adherence, and it significantly increases the risk of substantial penalties, operational disruptions, and reputational damage. Furthermore, it suggests a lack of internal control and a disregard for the spirit of the regulations, which are designed to prevent driver fatigue and improve road safety. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on drivers to self-report and correct their own HOS violations without any oversight or verification from the company. Drivers are responsible for their logs. The motor carrier has a legal and ethical obligation to ensure overall compliance. This approach abdicates the company's responsibility and creates a high likelihood of undetected violations, which can lead to fatigued driving and accidents. It also fails to provide drivers with the necessary support and guidance to navigate complex HOS rules, potentially leading to unintentional noncompliance. A third incorrect approach is to implement a policy that prioritizes meeting delivery schedules over strict adherence to HOS regulations, assuming that minor violations can be overlooked. This is a direct contravention of FMCSA regulations and a severe ethical lapse. The HOS rules are non-negotiable safety mandates. Prioritizing schedules over safety not only exposes Knight-Swift to significant legal and financial penalties, but also directly endangers drivers and the public. This approach demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the importance of regulatory compliance in the trucking industry. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Knight-Swift should adopt a systematic and proactive approach to regulatory compliance. This involves establishing clear policies and procedures that align with FMCSA regulations, investing in robust ELD technology, and providing comprehensive and ongoing training to drivers and management. Regular internal audits and a culture that encourages open communication about potential compliance issues are crucial. When potential violations are identified, the focus should be on understanding the root cause, implementing corrective actions, and reinforcing training to prevent recurrence. This decision-making process prioritizes safety and compliance, recognizing that these are foundational to the long-term success and integrity of the company. Question 9. Research into Knight-Swift's hiring practices reveals a situation where a promising candidate for a commercial driver position has provided all initial application materials, including a valid CDL and a self-attested medical status. However, the official verification of their medical examiner's certificate and their motor vehicle record, MVR, is still in progress and may take several more days to be fully processed by Knight-Swift's internal systems. Hiring manager is eager to get the driver into training to meet immediate fleet needs. Which of the following actions best adheres to the regulatory framework governing commercial motor carrier operations in the United States? Option A. Authorize the driver to begin training on non-driving aspects of the job, such as pre-trip inspections and company policies, while the official verification of their medical examiner's certificate and MVR is pending. Option B. Ensure all required documentation, including the verified medical examiner's certificate and the official MVR, is fully processed and reviewed by Knight-Swift's safety department before the driver operates any commercial motor vehicle or begins any training that involves operating such a vehicle. Option C. Proceed with onboarding the driver and allow them to operate a commercial motor vehicle for Knight-Swift, assuming their provided CDL is valid and their self-attested medical status is sufficient, pending the completion of official verifications. Option D. Allow the driver to begin their initial training program under supervision while the final verification of their medical examiner's certificate and MVR is completed. The correct answer is D. Allow the driver to begin their initial training program under supervision, while the final verification of their medical examiner's certificate and MVR is completed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's operational needs and the strict adherence to regulatory compliance, specifically concerning driver qualifications and safety. Knight-Swift, as a large transportation company, must navigate these complexities to ensure it operates legally and safely, thereby protecting its drivers, the public, and its own reputation. The core of the challenge lies in balancing efficiency with the non-negotiable requirements of federal regulations. The correct approach involves a proactive and thorough verification process that prioritizes compliance with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration (FMCSA) regulations. This means meticulously reviewing all documentation related to a prospective driver's commercial driver's license, CDL, medical certification, and driving record before allowing them to operate a commercial motor vehicle for Knight-Swift. This approach is ethically sound and legally mandated, as it directly addresses the FMCSA intent to ensure only qualified and medically fit individuals are behind the wheel of large trucks. It aligns with the principle of safety first and demonstrates Knight-Swift's commitment to responsible corporate citizenship. An incorrect approach would be to allow the driver to begin training or operating a vehicle while the verification process is still pending. This creates a significant regulatory failure because it violates FMCSA regulations that require these checks to be completed prior to operation. Ethically, it exposes the public to potential risk from an unvetted driver. Another incorrect approach would be to accept a driver's self-certification of their medical status without obtaining the required medical examiner's certificate. This bypasses a critical safety check mandated by the FMCSA and could lead to a driver operating a commercial vehicle who is medically unfit, posing a severe safety hazard. Finally, relying solely on the driver's word regarding their past driving record without independently verifying it through official sources like the motor vehicle record, MVR, is a failure to conduct due diligence, leaving Knight-Swift vulnerable to employing drivers with disqualifying violations. Professionals in this situation should employ a systematic decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory requirements, e.g., 49 CFR Part 383 for CDLs and Part 391 for driver qualifications. This should be followed by establishing clear internal procedures that incorporate these requirements at every stage of the hiring and onboarding process. Regular training for HR and safety personnel on these regulations is crucial. When faced with a situation where a deadline or operational pressure conflicts with compliance, the professional's duty is to uphold the regulatory standard, communicating the necessity of compliance to operational managers and seeking solutions that do not compromise safety or legality. Question 10. Market research demonstrates that the trucking industry faces constant pressure to optimize delivery times. Knight-Swift is experiencing a surge in demand, leading to a critical need to onboard new drivers quickly. A new driver applicant has provided documentation suggesting they possess the necessary commercial driver's license, CDL, and endorsements from a previous employer. However, due to the urgent need to fill a dispatch, the hiring manager is considering allowing the driver to begin operating a commercial motor vehicle for Knight-Swift, while the company's internal team completes the full verification of the applicant's driving record and confirms the validity of their previous certifications. Which of the following approaches best adheres to regulatory compliance for Knight-Swift? Option A. Initiate the process of verifying the driver's qualifications, but allow them to begin operating a commercial motor vehicle for urgent dispatches while the verification is pending, prioritizing immediate operational needs. Option B. Rely on the driver's self-certification of their experience and prior certifications, and proceed with dispatching them immediately, as the primary focus is meeting delivery schedules. Option C. Expedite the onboarding process by allowing the driver to operate a commercial motor vehicle based on their provided documentation, with the understanding that the full verification will be completed within the first week of employment. Option D. Conduct a complete verification of the driver's driving record, confirm the validity of their CDL and endorsements through official channels, and ensure all required documentation is present and accurate in their qualification file before allowing them to operate a commercial motor vehicle. The correct answer is D. Conduct a complete verification of the driver's driving record, confirm the validity of their CDL and endorsements through official channels, and ensure all required documentation is present and accurate in their qualification file before allowing them to operate a commercial motor vehicle. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid growth and the imperative to adhere strictly to regulatory compliance, particularly concerning driver qualifications and safety. Knight-Swift, as a large transportation company, operates under stringent federal regulations designed to ensure public safety. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations, even with the intent of efficiency, can lead to severe consequences, including fines, operational disruptions, and reputational damage. The core of the challenge lies in balancing operational demands with unwavering commitment to legal and ethical standards. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented review of all driver qualification files against the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, FMCSR, before allowing a driver to operate a commercial motor vehicle. This ensures that Knight-Swift is not only meeting but exceeding its legal obligations. Specifically, this approach aligns with FMCSR Part 383, Commercial Driver's License Program, and Part 384, State Programs for Commercial Driver's Licenses, which mandate specific requirements for driver licensing and endorsements. It also adheres to FMCSR Part 391, Qualifications of Drivers, which outlines the general qualifications, including medical certification and road tests. By prioritizing this meticulous verification, Knight-Swift demonstrates a commitment to safety and regulatory adherence, mitigating risks associated with unqualified drivers. An incorrect approach that involves expediting the onboarding process by assuming prior certifications are valid without independent verification fails to meet the requirements of FMCSR Part 383. 153, which states that a driver must present a valid commercial driver's license, CDL, and any required endorsements. It also violates FMCSR Part 391. 51, which requires employers to maintain complete and accurate driver qualification files, including proof of compliance with all qualification requirements. This approach creates a significant risk of employing drivers who do not meet the necessary safety standards, potentially leading to accidents and regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on the driver's self-certification of experience and bypass the formal review of their driving record and any required testing, directly contravenes FMCSR Part 391, 23 Investigation of Employment History, and Part 391, 31 Road Test. This failure to conduct due diligence in verifying a driver's qualifications is a serious regulatory breach. It exposes Knight-Swift to liability and undermines the safety framework intended to protect the public. A third incorrect approach, which is to prioritize filling immediate dispatch needs over ensuring all background checks and documentation are complete, demonstrates a disregard for the fundamental principles of regulatory compliance. This approach prioritizes short-term operational goals over long-term safety and legal standing. It is a direct violation of the spirit and letter of the FMCSR, which are designed to prevent unqualified drivers from operating commercial vehicles regardless of operational pressures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the applicable regulations, a commitment to a systematic and documented compliance process, and the courage to prioritize safety and legality over immediate operational expediency. When faced with pressure to expedite, professionals must ask, does this action fully comply with all relevant regulations and ethical standards? If the answer is uncertain or negative, the process must be halted until full compliance is achieved. This requires robust internal training, clear communication of compliance expectations, and a culture that empowers employees to raise concerns about potential regulatory violations without fear of reprisal. Question 11. Comparative studies suggest that in the trucking industry, driver fatigue is a significant factor in accidents. For Knight-Swift, a carrier operating under Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, regulations, what is the most appropriate and compliant course of action when a driver informs their dispatcher that they are nearing their maximum allowable driving hours and are experiencing significant fatigue, but are still a considerable distance from their designated delivery point? Option A. The dispatcher instructs the driver to take a short, informal break and then continue driving to make up for lost time. Option B. The The driver is encouraged by the dispatcher to push the limits of their driving hours, as long as they do not exceed the absolute maximum allowed by law to meet the delivery deadline. Option C. The driver continues driving to reach the delivery point, logging off duty only upon arrival to avoid delaying the shipment. Option D. The driver logs off duty immediately, and the dispatcher arranges for an alternative solution for the delivery, such as a relay driver or rescheduling, to ensure the driver receives their required off-duty time. Correct answer is D. The driver logs off duty immediately, and the dispatcher arranges for an alternative solution for the delivery, such as a relay driver or rescheduling, to ensure the driver receives their required off-duty time. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Knight-Swift, as a regulated entity, must navigate the complex landscape of federal trucking regulations, specifically those pertaining to hours of service (HOS). The driver's personal circumstances, while understandable, cannot override legal compliance. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency and driver well-being with strict adherence to safety regulations designed to prevent fatigue-related accidents. A failure to comply can result in severe penalties for the company and jeopardize public safety. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves the driver immediately logging off duty and the dispatcher ensuring no further driving occurs until the HOS requirements are met. This is the only approach that aligns with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, FMCSR, governing HOS. Specifically, 49 CFR Part 395 mandates strict limits on driving time and requires specific off-duty periods. By logging off, the driver accurately reflects their duty status, and the dispatcher respects this status, preventing any violation. This upholds the regulatory framework's primary objective, driver safety and accident prevention. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach where the driver continues driving to reach a destination before logging off is a direct violation of 49 CFR Part 395. This action falsely represents the driver's duty status and circumvents the HOS limitation, increasing the risk of fatigue-related incidents. It demonstrates a disregard for regulatory compliance and driver safety. An approach where the dispatcher instructs the driver to push the limits or find ways to bend the rules to meet a deadline is also a serious regulatory failure. This encourages falsification of records and directly contravenes the spirit and letter of the HOS regulations. It exposes Knight-Swift to significant penalties, including fines and potential operational sanctions, and creates an unsafe working environment. An approach where the driver is encouraged to take a short break and then resume driving, even if it's not a full off-duty period, is problematic. While breaks are important, they do not substitute for the mandatory off-duty periods required by 49 CFR Part 395. This approach may still result in a violation if the driver exceeds their allowed driving time or fails to meet the minimum off-duty requirements before resuming driving. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the transportation industry, particularly those at companies like Knight-Swift, must prioritize regulatory compliance and safety above all else. When faced with a conflict between operational demands and safety regulations, the decision-making process should involve 1. Immediate identification of the relevant regulation, in this case, FMCSR HOS rules. 2. Strict adherence to the regulation, even if it causes operational inconvenience. 3. Clear communication with all parties involved, driver, dispatcher, management, about the regulatory requirements and the necessary actions. 4. Documentation of the situation and the actions taken to ensure transparency and accountability. The goal is to foster a culture of safety and compliance, where shortcuts are never taken at the expense of legal obligations and the well-being of drivers and the public. Question 12. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new dispatch scheduling system could reduce operational costs for Knight-Swift by 7% annually. However, preliminary internal discussions suggest this new system might inadvertently encourage drivers to extend their on-duty hours beyond the limits prescribed by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, FMCSR, to meet tighter delivery windows. Which of the following approaches best ensures Knight-Swift's compliance and professional integrity? Option A. Proceed with implementing the new dispatch system immediately, assuming drivers will manage their hours responsibly within the FMCSR and address any potential violations reactively if they arise. Option B. Implement the new dispatch system and instruct drivers to self-report their hours, trusting their professional judgment to stay within FMCSR limits. And conduct only a cursory review of logs. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed dispatch scheduling system's impact on driver hours of service (HOS) by consulting with FMCSR compliance experts and legal counsel to ensure full adherence to federal regulations before implementation. Option D. Prioritize the 7% cost savings by implementing the new system and instruct dispatchers to adjust schedules to meet delivery times, with the understanding that drivers may need to operate close to or at the maximum legal driving hours. The correct answer is A. Proceed with implementing the new dispatch system immediately, assuming drivers will manage their hours responsibly within the FMCSR and address any potential violations reactively if they arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency and cost savings with strict adherence to federal trucking regulations designed to ensure public safety. Knight-Swift, as a large carrier, faces constant pressure to optimize its operations, but any decision impacting driver hours or safety protocols must be evaluated against the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, FMCSR. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting and applying the FMCSR, specifically the hours of service, (HOS) rules, in a way that is both economically sound and legally compliant. A misinterpretation or deliberate disregard can lead to severe penalties, including fines, operational sanctions, and damage to the company's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the FMCSR, particularly Part 395, which governs driver hours. This approach prioritizes understanding the specific requirements for record keeping, on-duty time, driving time, and rest periods. It necessitates consulting with legal counsel or compliance experts specializing in transportation law to ensure accurate interpretation and application of the rules to the proposed operational change. The justification for this approach is rooted in the absolute priority of regulatory compliance. The FMCSR are not suggestions. They are mandatory federal laws. Adhering to them is essential for maintaining a safe operating environment, protecting drivers, and avoiding legal repercussions. This proactive and informed approach demonstrates a commitment to safety and legal integrity, which are paramount in the trucking industry. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost savings identified in the cost-benefit analysis, without a comprehensive understanding of the FMCSR, would be a significant regulatory failure. This would involve implementing changes that, while potentially saving money, violate HOS regulations by allowing drivers to exceed legal driving limits or reduce required rest periods. Such an approach disregards the fundamental purpose of the HOS rules, which is to prevent driver fatigue and reduce accidents. This failure is not just a procedural oversight but a direct violation of federal law, exposing Knight-Swift to substantial fines, potential suspension of operating authority, and increased liability in the event of an accident. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or informal interpretations of the HOS rules from other carriers or drivers. While industry best practices are valuable, they cannot supersede explicit federal regulations. This approach fails because it lacks the rigor of a formal legal and regulatory review. It risks adopting practices that may be common, but are nonetheless non-compliant, leading to the same legal and safety consequences as a deliberate violation. The ethical failure here is a lack of due diligence in ensuring the safety and legality of operations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with identifying the core regulatory framework applicable to the proposed operational change. This involves a deep dive into the relevant statutes and regulations, such as the FMCSR for trucking. Next, it is crucial to assess the potential impact of the change on compliance. If there is any ambiguity or potential for non-compliance, seeking expert advice from legal counsel or compliance specialists is essential. The decision should then be made based on a clear understanding of the regulatory requirements and the potential risks and benefits, with regulatory compliance and safety always taking precedence over short-term cost savings. Question 13. Regulatory review indicates that a Knight-Swift driver has logged 10 hours and 45 minutes of driving time and has been on duty for 13 hours and 50 minutes. The driver is 15 minutes away from their destination. Which of the following actions best ensures compliance with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration (FMCSA) Hours of service regulations. Option A. Instruct the driver to take their mandatory 30-minute break immediately, then complete the remaining 15 minutes of driving. Option B. Allow the driver to complete the remaining 15 minutes of driving, but ensure they log the time as yard move to avoid impacting their driving limit. Option C. Allow the driver to complete the remaining 15 minutes of driving as they are close to their destination and have not exceeded the 11-hour driving limit. Option D. Advise the driver to stop driving and log off duty, as they are nearing their 14-hour on-duty limit and cannot legally drive further. The correct answer is C. Allow the driver to complete the remaining 15 minutes of driving as they are close to their destination and have not exceeded the 11-hour driving limit. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance within the trucking industry, specifically concerning driver hours of service. Knight-Swift, like all carriers, must balance the need to meet delivery schedules with the absolute mandate to prevent driver fatigue, which is a primary safety concern regulated by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the hours of service, HOS, regulations accurately, especially when faced with potential pressure to expedite deliveries or when dealing with the complexities of electronic logging devices, ELD, and their data. Careful judgment is required to ensure that operational demands do not lead to violations that could jeopardize driver safety, company reputation, and legal standing. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to the FMCSA HOS regulations, specifically focusing on the 11-hour driving limit, 14-hour on-duty limit, and the 30-minute break requirement. This approach prioritizes driver safety and regulatory compliance by ensuring that all driving and on-duty periods are accurately recorded and that drivers do not exceed their permissible limits. The justification for this approach is rooted in FMCSA Part 395, which outlines these critical safety regulations designed to mitigate fatigue-related accidents. Adhering to these rules is not merely a procedural requirement, but a fundamental ethical obligation to protect drivers and the public. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking a driver's on-duty status immediately before a driving period, even if it appears brief, is a significant regulatory failure. The FMCSA defines on-duty broadly, and any time spent performing work-related tasks, such as pre-trip inspections or paperwork, counts towards the 14-hour limit. Failing to account for this time can lead to a driver exceeding their on-duty limit, even if they haven't exceeded their driving limit, resulting in a HOS violation. Another incorrect approach, such as assuming a driver can extend their driving time slightly to reach a destination if they are close to their limit, directly contravenes the 11-hour driving rule and the principle of preventing fatigue. This demonstrates a disregard for the safety regulations and an acceptance of risk. Finally, a flawed approach that relies solely on the ELD's automatic logging without verifying the accuracy of the recorded duty status changes, especially during periods of potential ambiguity like yard moves or loading/unloading, also represents a regulatory failure. While ELDs are mandatory, drivers and carriers retain the responsibility to ensure the data is accurate and compliant with HOS rules. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a proactive commitment to understanding and internalizing FMCSA regulations. When faced with a scenario like this, a professional should first confirm the exact time spent on duty immediately preceding the driving period and the total driving time for the day. They should then cross-reference this with the 14-hour on-duty and 11-hour driving limits. If there is any doubt or potential for violation, the professional must err on the side of caution and ensure compliance, even if it means a slight delay in delivery. This involves clear communication with the driver and dispatch to manage expectations and find compliant solutions. The decision-making framework should prioritize safety and compliance above all else, recognizing that short-term operational gains achieved through regulatory shortcuts carry severe long-term risks. Question 14. Consider a scenario where a Knight-Swift logistics manager is responsible for selecting a new third-party carrier for a significant shipping contract. The manager discovers that one of the most competitive and qualified bidders is a company owned and operated by their sibling. The manager has no direct financial stake in the sibling's company, but recognizes the potential for familial influence on their decision-making process. Option A. Proceed with the evaluation of all bids, including the sibling's company, and make a decision based solely on the merits of each bid, assuming familial ties will not influence their judgment. Option B. Seek informal advice from a trusted senior colleague within Knightswift who is not in a compliance role to gauge their opinion on how to proceed. Option C. Report the potential conflict of interest to Knightswift's compliance department and recuse themselves from the selection process for this specific contract. Option D. Discuss the situation with their sibling, and if the sibling assures them that the relationship will not affect the bidding process, proceed with the evaluation and selection. The correct answer is C. Report the potential conflict of interest to Knightswift's compliance department and recuse themselves from the selection process for this specific contract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a Knightswift employee to navigate a situation where a potential conflict of interest could arise, impacting the company's integrity and adherence to regulatory standards. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and managing situations that could compromise objective decision-making or create an unfair advantage, all while upholding the company's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between acceptable business practices and those that could lead to regulatory scrutiny or damage Knightswift's reputation. The correct approach involves proactively identifying the potential conflict of interest and reporting it through the established internal channels at Knightswift. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency and allows the company's compliance department to assess the situation and implement appropriate mitigation strategies, such as recusal from decision-making or seeking independent review. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with regulatory expectations for companies to have robust conflict of interest policies in place. By reporting, the employee ensures that Knightswift can maintain its operational integrity and avoid any appearance of impropriety, thereby adhering to the spirit and letter of relevant transportation and business ethics regulations. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the business relationship without disclosure, assuming it would not impact decisions. This failure stems from a disregard for the potential for even subconscious bias, which can lead to decisions that are not in Knightswift's best interest. Ethically, it violates the principle of acting with undivided loyalty to the employer. From a regulatory standpoint, it could be seen as a breach of internal controls designed to prevent conflicts of interest, potentially leading to penalties or sanctions if discovered. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the potential conflict with the relative, and then proceed based on their assurance that it would not be an issue. This is flawed because the relative's perspective may be biased, and their assurance does not absolve the Knightswift employee of their responsibility to report the potential conflict to their employer. This approach bypasses the company's established procedures for managing such situations and relies on an unqualified assessment of risk. A third incorrect approach would be to seek advice from a colleague outside of the formal reporting structure. While well-intentioned, this circumvents the established compliance framework. The colleague may not have the full picture or the authority to provide definitive guidance, and the information shared could inadvertently lead to broader breaches of confidentiality or misinterpretations of policy. The proper channel for addressing potential conflicts of interest is always through the designated compliance or legal departments. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Knightswift's code of conduct and conflict of interest policies. When faced with a situation that could potentially create a conflict, the employee should first identify the nature of the relationship and the potential for influence on business decisions. The next step is to consult the company's policies to understand the reporting requirements. If a potential conflict is identified, the employee must proactively report it to their supervisor or the designated compliance officer, providing all relevant details. This ensures that the company can manage the situation appropriately, protecting both the employee and Knightswift from regulatory or ethical breaches. Question 15. The risk matrix shows a potential for misinterpretation of revenue recognition policies at Knightswift, which could lead to an overstatement of current period earnings. The external auditors have flagged this as a significant area of concern during their interim review, requesting additional documentation and clarification on specific transactions. The CFO is concerned about the impact on investor confidence if the issue is perceived as material. Which of the following actions best represents a compliant and ethically sound approach for Knightswift to address this situation? Option A. Delay providing the requested documentation to the auditors until the final audit fieldwork begins, hoping the issue will be less prominent by then. Option B. Instruct the accounting team to make minor adjustments to the revenue figures to align with the projected earnings targets, without fully resolving the underlying policy interpretation with the auditors. Option C. Immediately provide the auditors with all requested documentation and engage in a detailed discussion to clarify the revenue recognition policies and their application to the flagged transactions, ensuring full transparency. Option D. Advise the auditors that the flagged transactions are standard practice and do not warrant further detailed review, suggesting they focus on other areas. The correct answer is C. Immediately provide the auditors with all requested documentation and engage in a detailed discussion to clarify the revenue recognition policies and their application to the flagged transactions, ensuring full transparency. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Knight-Swift, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight regarding its financial reporting and disclosures. The pressure to meet investor expectations and maintain stock value can create an environment where the temptation to misrepresent financial performance exists. However, adherence to regulatory frameworks, such as those enforced by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, in the United States, is paramount. The core of the challenge lies in balancing business objectives with legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and addressing potential misstatements through robust internal controls and transparent communication with auditors. This demonstrates a commitment to accurate financial reporting, which is a fundamental ethical and legal requirement. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, GAAP, and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX, which mandate internal control over financial reporting and accurate disclosure. By engaging with the audit team early and providing comprehensive documentation, Knight-Swift upholds its fiduciary duty to shareholders and maintains the integrity of its financial statements. An incorrect approach that involves delaying the disclosure of the identified issue to the auditors until the last possible moment would be professionally unacceptable. This delay could be interpreted as an attempt to obscure the problem or to influence the audit process, potentially violating SOX provisions related to auditor independence and cooperation. Furthermore, withholding information from auditors undermines the audit's effectiveness and could lead to a qualified audit opinion or even a restatement of financial statements, damaging Knight-Swift's reputation and investor confidence. Another incorrect approach, which is to instruct the accounting team to adjust the figures to meet the projected targets without a clear basis in accounting principles, represents a direct violation of GAAP and potentially securities fraud. This action prioritizes short-term financial performance over accuracy and legality, exposing Knight-Swift and its management to significant legal and financial penalties. It also erodes the trust placed in the company by its stakeholders. A third incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the auditor's concerns as minor and proceed with the current reporting without further investigation or discussion, demonstrates a disregard for the audit process and regulatory compliance. Auditors are independent third parties tasked with verifying the accuracy of financial statements. Ignoring their findings, especially when they indicate potential misstatements, is a failure to adhere to the spirit and letter of regulatory requirements designed to protect investors. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, e.g., SEC rules, SOX, GAAP. When potential issues arise, the immediate steps should be to gather all relevant facts, consult with internal legal and accounting experts, and engage transparently with external auditors. The priority must always be the accuracy and integrity of financial reporting, even if it means facing short-term challenges. A culture of ethical conduct and open communication is essential to navigate these complexities effectively. Question 16. The investigation demonstrates that a Knight-Swift dispatcher accessed a driver's motor vehicle record to obtain their home address and shared it with a former employee who claimed they needed it for a personal matter. Which of the following actions, if taken by the dispatcher, would be the most compliant with the Driver's Privacy Protection Act (DPPA) and Knight-Swift's internal policies? Option A. Access the driver's medical information from the motor vehicle record and provide it to a third-party vendor for marketing analysis, as this could lead to improved services for drivers. Option B. Refuse to share the information, stating that personal information from motor vehicle records cannot be disclosed without a legally permissible reason, and advised the former employee to seek information through official channels if they have a legitimate need. Option C. Provide the driver's full social security number to the new dispatcher for easier identification purposes, as this streamlines internal processes. Option D. Share the driver's home address with the former employee, assuming that personal matters could encompass a broad range of acceptable reasons for disclosure. The correct answer is B. Refuse to share the information, stating that personal information from motor vehicle records cannot be disclosed without a legally permissible reason, and advise the former employee to seek information through official channels if they have a legitimate need. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for Knight-Swift employees regarding the proper handling of sensitive customer information within the confines of U.S. federal regulations, specifically the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, DPPA. The difficulty lies in balancing the need for operational efficiency with the legal obligation to protect personal data. Employees must understand what constitutes protected information and the permissible uses and disclosures, requiring careful judgment to avoid unintentional violations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the DPPA provisions by only accessing and disclosing motor vehicle records for legally permissible purposes. This means understanding that information like a driver's social security number, medical information, or disability status is protected and cannot be shared without explicit consent or a specific legal exception. This approach aligns with the regulatory framework by prioritizing data privacy and security, thereby preventing unauthorized access and potential misuse of sensitive personal information. Incorrect approaches analysis. Accessing and sharing a driver's medical information with a third-party vendor for marketing purposes is a direct violation of the DPPA. The DPPA explicitly prohibits the disclosure of personal information from state motor vehicle records for marketing purposes. This action demonstrates a failure to understand the scope of protected information and the limitations on its use. Disclosing a driver's home address to a former employee of Knight-Swift who claims they need it for a personal matter is also a violation, unless the former employee can demonstrate a specific, legally recognized need under the DPPA, e.g., for a court order or law enforcement investigation. This disclosure is unauthorized and breaches the privacy protections afforded by the Act. Providing a driver's full social security number to a new dispatcher for easier identification is a severe breach of the DPPA. Social security numbers are highly sensitive personal identifiers, and their disclosure from motor vehicle records is strictly prohibited for such purposes. This action shows a profound disregard for data security and privacy laws. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Knight-Swift should approach situations involving customer data with a presumption of privacy. When in doubt about the permissibility of accessing or disclosing information, they should consult internal compliance policies and legal counsel. A robust understanding of the DPPA and its exceptions is crucial. Decision-making should be guided by a commitment to legal compliance and ethical data handling, prioritizing the protection of individual privacy above all else. Question 17. The analysis reveals that a senior financial analyst at Knight-Swift, responsible for preparing quarterly earnings reports, has a close family member who is a significant investor in a company that is a major competitor to Knight-Swift. The analyst is aware that this competitor is facing significant financial challenges that could impact Knight-Swift's market position. How should the analyst proceed regarding the preparation and disclosure of Knight-Swift's upcoming financial report? Option A. Proceed with preparing the financial report as usual, assuming personal relationships will not influence professional judgment. Option B. Immediately disclose the relationship and potential conflict of interest to Knight-Swift's compliance department and follow their guidance. Option C. Discuss the situation with the family member to understand the competitor's financial health better before finalizing the report. Option D. Discreetly adjust the reporting to reflect the competitor's challenges in a way that might benefit Knight-Swift's perceived performance, without explicit disclosure. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the relationship and potential conflict of interest to Knight-Swift's compliance department and follow their guidance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual at Knight-Swift to navigate a situation where a potential conflict of interest could arise, impacting the integrity of financial reporting and regulatory compliance. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that all financial disclosures are accurate, complete, and free from any undue influence or bias, which is paramount in maintaining investor confidence and adhering to stringent regulatory standards. Careful judgment is required to identify and address such potential conflicts proactively. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate internal compliance or legal department at Knight-Swift. This is the best professional practice because it adheres to fundamental principles of corporate governance and regulatory compliance, specifically those mandated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, for publicly traded companies like Knight-Swift. Prompt disclosure ensures that the company can implement appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from decision-making processes or independent review, thereby preventing any actual or perceived impropriety. This aligns with the SEC's emphasis on transparency and the prevention of fraudulent financial reporting, as outlined in regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX, and various SEC rules concerning disclosure obligations and codes of conduct. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the financial reporting without disclosing the relationship. This failure constitutes a significant ethical and regulatory breach. It violates the principle of objectivity and could lead to biased financial statements, misleading investors and stakeholders. This directly contravenes SEC regulations that demand accurate and transparent financial reporting and could be construed as a violation of anti-fraud provisions. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to manage the situation independently by downplaying the significance of the relationship or assuming it won't influence the reporting. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses established compliance procedures and the oversight mechanisms designed to prevent conflicts of interest. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the severity of potential conflicts and the company's duty to uphold regulatory standards, potentially exposing Knight-Swift to severe penalties and reputational damage. The professional reasoning framework for such situations involves a commitment to ethical conduct, a thorough understanding of relevant regulations, in this case, U.S. federal securities laws and SEC guidelines, and a proactive approach to risk management. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, professionals should always err on the side of caution by seeking guidance from their compliance department. This ensures that decisions are made in accordance with legal requirements and ethical best practices, safeguarding both the individual and the organization. Question 18. Compliance review shows that a Knight-Swift driver has a close personal relationship with an individual who owns a company that provides maintenance services to Knight-Swift. The driver has not disclosed this relationship to Knight-Swift management. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the driver to take? Option A. Continue to use the vendor's services as usual, assuming the personal relationship does not influence professional judgment. Option B. Discreetly inform the vendor that their services might be scrutinized more closely due to the driver's connection. Option C. Wait to see if any issues arise with the vendor's services before considering disclosure. Option D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the vendor's services to Knight-Swift's compliance department or designated ethics officer. The correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the vendor's services to Knight-Swift's compliance department or designated ethics officer. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of how to handle potential conflicts of interest and ensure fair and transparent dealings within the transportation industry, specifically concerning Knight-Swift's operations. The core difficulty lies in balancing business relationships with regulatory obligations and ethical conduct. A driver's personal involvement with a vendor that Knight-Swift uses creates a situation where objectivity could be compromised, potentially leading to preferential treatment or the appearance of impropriety. Careful judgment is required to uphold Knight-Swift's integrity and comply with relevant regulations. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the relationship to the appropriate internal channels at Knight-Swift. This allows the company to assess the situation, determine if a conflict of interest exists, and implement appropriate mitigation strategies, such as recusal from decision-making processes involving the vendor or even reassigning the driver if necessary. This proactive disclosure aligns with ethical business practices and regulatory expectations that emphasize transparency and the avoidance of conflicts of interest. It demonstrates a commitment to maintaining a fair and unbiased business environment, which is crucial for regulatory compliance and maintaining trust with all stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the relationship, assuming it poses no actual problem. This failure to disclose is a significant ethical lapse and a potential regulatory violation. It creates an environment where conflicts of interest can fester undetected, leading to unfair business practices and potential financial impropriety. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal the relationship or downplay its significance. This is also a serious ethical breach and can be viewed as deceptive conduct, undermining the trust placed in the employee and the company. Furthermore, attempting to leverage the personal relationship for preferential treatment for the vendor, even if not explicitly instructed by Knightswift, would constitute a direct violation of ethical standards and likely regulatory guidelines concerning fair competition and vendor relations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, integrity, and adherence to company policy and regulatory requirements. When faced with a situation that could present a conflict of interest, the first step should always be to identify the potential issue. This is followed by a thorough understanding of relevant company policies and applicable regulations. The next critical step is to disclose the situation to the appropriate authority within the organization, providing all necessary details. This allows for an informed decision to be made regarding the management of the potential conflict. Finally, professionals must act in accordance with the guidance provided by their organization, ensuring that all actions are ethical, legal, and in the best interest of Knightswift. Question 19. To address the challenge of maintaining ethical operations and regulatory compliance at Knightswift, imagine a situation where a Knightswift employee is responsible for selecting a vendor for a new logistics software. The employee discovers that one of the leading vendor candidates is owned by a close family member. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Knightswift employee to ensure adherence to ethical standards and company policy? Option A. Proceed with the vendor selection process as planned, assuming their professional judgment will ensure the best outcome for Knightswift, and only mention the relationship if asked. Option B. Select the vendor owned by the family member if their proposal is competitive, believing that familial ties should not hinder business opportunities. Option C. Discuss the situation privately with the family member who owns the vendor company to ensure they understand the need for a fair selection process. Option D. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to their direct supervisor and the compliance department, requesting guidance on how to proceed with the vendor selection process. Correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to their direct supervisor and the compliance department, requesting guidance on how to proceed with the vendor selection process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a Knightswift employee to navigate a situation where a potential conflict of interest could arise, impacting the company's integrity and compliance. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and managing situations that could compromise objective decision-making or create an unfair advantage. Careful judgment is required to uphold Knightswift's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate internal authority at Knightswift. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency and allows the company to implement measures to mitigate any risks. Specifically, reporting the situation to a supervisor or the compliance department ensures that Knightswift can assess the situation objectively, assign tasks impartially, and prevent any perception of favoritism or impropriety. This aligns with general ethical business practices and any specific internal policies Knightswift may have regarding conflicts of interest, which are designed to protect the company's reputation and ensure fair dealings. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the decision without any disclosure. This failure to report a potential conflict of interest violates the principle of transparency and could lead to accusations of bias or unethical behavior. It undermines the trust placed in the employee and the company. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the situation only with the colleague involved. While collegial, this bypasses the established internal reporting mechanisms designed for conflict resolution and oversight, failing to involve the necessary authority to make an objective determination and implement appropriate safeguards. This approach risks the appearance of a cover-up or an attempt to resolve a company-wide issue at an informal level, which is insufficient for regulatory compliance and ethical governance. Professionals at Knightswift should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves recognizing potential conflicts of interest, understanding the company's policies on disclosure, and proactively reporting such situations to the designated channels. When faced with a potential conflict, the process should be: 1. Identify the potential conflict. 2. Consult internal policies and guidelines. 3. Disclose the conflict to the appropriate supervisor or compliance officer. 4. Follow the guidance provided by the company to manage or eliminate the conflict. This structured approach ensures that all actions are aligned with Knightswift's commitment to integrity and legal obligations. Question 20. The review process indicates that a driver's representative from a newly contracted logistics partner has requested access to specific driver performance metrics and contact information for a Knightswift driver. The representative states this information is needed to optimize route planning and ensure driver well-being. However, the request was made via an informal email and lacks any official company letterhead or formal authorization document. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Knightswift employee receiving this request, considering Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, regulations and company policy? Option A. Provide the requested information but redact sensitive personal contact details, assuming this partial disclosure is a reasonable compromise. Option B. Respond to the representative by stating that Knightswift does not share driver performance metrics or contact information with third parties under any circumstances, regardless of partnership status. Option C. Politely inform the representative that the request cannot be fulfilled without a formal written authorization from the driver and a verified request from an authorized entity within the partner company, and advise them on the correct procedure for submitting such requests. Option D. Forward the driver's information directly to the representative via email, as they are from a contracted partner and the request seems legitimate for operational efficiency. Correct answer is D. Forward the driver's information directly to the representative via email, as they are from a contracted partner and the request seems legitimate for operational efficiency. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a Knightswift employee to navigate potential conflicts between company policy, regulatory requirements, and ethical considerations when handling sensitive customer information. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that all actions taken are compliant with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, regulations, specifically those pertaining to the privacy and security of driver information, while also upholding Knightswift's internal data handling protocols. Careful judgment is required to avoid any actions that could lead to regulatory penalties, reputational damage, or a breach of trust with drivers. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the FMCSA requirements for data access and disclosure. This means that any request for driver information must be processed through established, authorized channels that are designed to verify the requester's legitimacy and purpose, ensuring compliance with regulations like 49 CFR Part 382, which governs drug and alcohol testing records, and other relevant privacy provisions. This approach is correct because it prioritizes regulatory compliance and data security, safeguarding both the company and the drivers from potential harm. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical data stewardship and a thorough understanding of the legal obligations Knightswift has towards its employees and the regulatory bodies overseeing the trucking industry. An incorrect approach that involves directly providing driver information to an unauthorized individual, even if they claim to be a representative of a partner company, fails to meet regulatory standards. This bypasses necessary verification steps and could lead to unauthorized access and misuse of sensitive data, violating privacy laws and potentially FMCSA regulations concerning record confidentiality. Another incorrect approach, such as delaying the response indefinitely without proper escalation or communication, also poses a risk. While it might seem cautious, it can hinder legitimate business processes and may not align with Knightswift's internal service level agreements or the spirit of regulatory cooperation, potentially leading to operational inefficiencies and dissatisfaction. Finally, Attempting to interpret the request based on assumptions about the requester's intent, rather than following established procedures, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This subjective interpretation can lead to unintentional breaches of confidentiality and noncompliance with mandated protocols. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes verification and adherence to established protocols. This involves 1. Identifying the nature of the request and the information sought. 2. Consulting relevant company policies and regulatory guidelines, in this case, FMCSA regulations. 3. Verifying the identity and authorization of the requester through official channels. 4. Processing the request strictly according to approved procedures, ensuring all documentation and consent requirements are met. 5. Escalating any ambiguities or unusual requests to appropriate internal departments, e.g., legal, compliance, for guidance. This systematic approach ensures that all actions are defensible, compliant, and ethically sound.